Welcome back, my friend. In 1854, a clipper ship near Java sailed into an ocean that had turned white. There was no moon, no ice, and no land ahead, only a vast, luminous sea stretching beyond the horizon. For generations, sailors described this impossible light. Tonight, we follow the mystery they left behind. Settle into a comfortable position, soften your breathing, and let the quiet ocean carry you towards sleep. Subscribe to Deep Sleep Storytelling for more peaceful journeys through history, science, and the mysteries of the sea. The first white line on the horizon. Long before satellites watched the oceans from above, long before research vessels carried laboratories across the sea, and long before scientists understood that creatures too small to be seen could create light, there were only ships, wooden ships moving slowly across enormous distances, ships guided by stars, by compasses, by carefully drawn charts, and by the quiet judgment of men who had spent much of their lives watching the horizon. In June of 1854, one of those ships was sailing through the tropical waters near Java. Her name was the Shooting Star. She was an American clipper ship, built for speed, with a narrow wooden hull and tall masts carrying wide fields of canvas into the wind. By day, her sails would have shone pale beneath the sun. By night, they became darker shapes against the sky, rising and falling almost imperceptibly as the ship traveled over the long breathing surface of the sea. Captain W.E. Kingman commanded the vessel. He was accustomed to the ocean in all its ordinary moods. He knew the hard glitter of noon upon open water. He knew the silver road that moonlight sometimes laid across the waves. He knew how distant rain could soften the horizon, and how foam could gather around a ship when the wind became strong. But on this particular night, the sea would show him something for which experience had not prepared him. The evening had settled quietly. The heat of the tropical day still lingered in the deck planks and in the ropes stretched between the masts. A light wind pressed against the sails. Wooden blocks creaked softly overhead. Water whispered along the hull. There was no great storm approaching. No thunder rolled beyond the horizon. No lightning moved among the clouds. The sky was mostly clear, and the ship continued steadily through the darkness. For the men standing watch, it must have seemed like one more ordinary night in the middle of a very long voyage. The hours at sea often passed this way. A sailor might stand near the rail, listening to the same low sounds he had heard on countless nights before. The pull of the rigging, the movement of the canvas, the faint footstep of another man crossing the deck, the occasional order spoken quietly so that it would not disturb the calm. Beyond the ship, there was little to see, only stars above and the black ocean below. Then, somewhere ahead of the vessel, a pale line appeared. At first, it may have seemed no more important than a thin bank of mist. The horizon at night can easily deceive the eye. A distant cloud may resemble land. The glow of the moon, hidden below the edge of the world, may brighten one part of the sky before the moon itself appears. Breaking waves over shallow water can create a white line that seems to remain motionless in the darkness. And so, perhaps, the first sailor who noticed the brightness did not immediately call the captain. Perhaps he watched it for a while. He may have narrowed his eyes and leaned forward, trying to decide whether the light belonged to the sky or to the sea. But the pale line did not disappear. It grew wider. The shooting star continued toward it, and the light slowly spread across more of the horizon. It did not rise like dawn. It did not form a glowing arch in the sky. It remained low, close to the water, as though some distant shore were covered in snow and shining faintly in the night. But there was no snowy shore near Java. There was no ice. There was no reason for winter to appear in those warm, tropical waters. More of the crew began to notice. Men who had been attending to ropes or sails turned their attention toward the bow. Those nearest the rail looked outward in silence. The strange brightness waited ahead of them. It did not flicker. It did not flash. It simply remained there, quiet and pale, growing larger as the ship approached. Captain Kingman came to observe it. From the deck, he studied the horizon as any careful captain would. A light at sea could mean many things. It might mark another ship. It might reveal a reef. It might signal land where the chart showed only open water. A mistake in navigation could carry a vessel toward danger long before the danger itself became visible. But there were no familiar signs of land, no dark outline of hills, no scattered fires, no sound of surf reaching them across the water. The compass held its course. The ship continued forward. The brightness was no longer a narrow line. It had become a wide, pale region lying across the sea ahead. And then the shooting star reached its edge. There was no wall, no sudden wave, no sound to announce the crossing. The vessel simply passed through an invisible boundary. Behind her, the ocean remained dark. Ahead of her, the water shone. Within moments, the wooden ship was sailing into a white sea. The glow surrounded the bow first. It spread along both sides of the hull and continued outward until its farthest edges could no longer be seen. The waves had not become larger. The wind had not changed. Yet the entire appearance of the ocean was transformed. The sea looked pale and smooth, like a vast plain covered in freshly fallen snow. Every small movement of the water carried the same strange light. The glow did not belong only to the curling tops of waves. It seemed to rise from the body of the sea itself. Above, the sky appeared unusually black. There were few clouds, but the darkness overhead seemed deeper now because the ocean beneath it had become bright. The stars still remained in their familiar places, but their light was distant and cold. The light below the ship was different. It was softer, closer, alive. The sailors stood upon the deck between two great spaces. Above them stretched the dark sky. Below them spread a shining world that had not been there only moments before. Some may have wondered whether the water had become shallow. Others may have searched the darkness for a hidden moon. Perhaps one man thought of fog, another of floating ice, another of some distant reflection whose source could not yet be seen. But none of these explanations seemed to fit. No moon hung over the sea. No mist concealed the horizon. No winter wind touched the sails. The night remained warm. The ocean remained open and still. The water shone. The shooting star moved farther into the luminous region. Her hull divided the pale surface. Her sails carried her onward at the same steady pace. Behind the stern, her wake stretched through the light, leaving a darker path for a moment before the glowing water closed gently around it again. There was no panic aboard the vessel. Nothing rose from the sea. No violent wave struck the ship. No storm descended from the sky. The mystery was quiet, and perhaps that quietness made it even more extraordinary. A sudden flash can be dismissed as lightning. A brief sparkle may be blamed on the eye, but this light did not vanish. Minute after minute, it remained. The ship sailed on, and the white ocean continued beyond her in every direction. The men could do little except watch. They had entered something immense without knowing where it began, how far it extended, or what might be creating it beneath the surface. The charts could tell them the depth of certain waters. The compass could tell them their direction. The stars could help reveal their position. But no instrument aboard the shooting star could explain why the night had lost its darkness. For generations, sailors had crossed these waters, carrying stories from one shore to another. Stories of storms that arrived beneath clear skies, of islands seen once and never found again, of strange creatures rising briefly beside a ship before returning to the depths. Many of these stories changed as they traveled. Some became larger, some became darker, some became legends. But on this night, Captain Kingman did not need a legend. He had only to look over the rail. The impossible was already there. It stretched from the side of his ship to the farthest horizon, and somewhere beneath that broad white surface, countless living things were producing a light that science would not fully begin to understand for many years. Yet the sailors did not know that. To them, there was only the ship, the warm night, the black sky, and an ocean that had quietly turned white. Sometimes the unknown does not arrive with thunder. It does not tear open the sky or rise violently from the depths. Sometimes it begins as nothing more than a faint line in the distance, a line so small that it might easily be ignored. And then, slowly, as the ship continues forward, that line expands until the familiar world is left behind, and everything ahead is filled with light. A sea like a field of snow. The shooting star was now fully inside the light. Behind her, somewhere beyond the stern, the ordinary darkness of the ocean still remained. But from the bow to the horizon ahead, and from one side of the ship to the other, the sea had become pale. It was not bright like daylight. It did not shine with the hard brilliance of the sun. Instead, it gave off a soft and even glow, as though the entire surface of the ocean had been covered by a thin layer of white fire. The sailors leaned over the rail. Below them, the water moved in the same familiar way it always had. Small waves rose, small waves fell. The hull pressed forward through them, yet every curve of the water carried the same quiet light. Captain Kingman would later compare the sight to a field of snow. It was perhaps the closest image available to him. The ocean appeared smooth and white beneath the black sky, extending so far into the distance that no edge could be seen. But snow belongs to winter. Snow belongs to mountains, forests, frozen roads, and cold wind. This sea was warm. The tropical air still rested gently against the skin. The sails remained filled by a mild breeze. No frost touched the ropes. No ice formed along the wooden deck. And still, the ship seemed to be traveling across a great white plain. The light was not broken into separate flashes. It did not appear only where the waves curled. It did not wait for the ship to disturb the surface. It was already there, Before the bow reached each small rise of water, that water was glowing. After the hull passed, the glow remained. The entire sea seemed illuminated from within. Some of the sailors had probably seen luminous water before. Men who spent years at sea were familiar with nights when the wake of a ship filled with blue sparks. They had seen waves break in sudden flashes. They had watched tiny points of light scatter behind a moving oar or around a rope dragged through the water. Such sights were strange, but not unknown. Sometimes, when a hand was dipped into dark seawater and lifted again, droplets seemed to carry small stars. Sometimes fish, moving beneath the surface, left brief shining trails behind them. These flashes appeared and disappeared with movement. They responded to pressure, waves, or the passing hull. But the light surrounding the shooting star was different. It did not need to be awakened. It did not burst into existence and then fade. It remained steady, quiet, continuous. The sailors may have watched the bow wave carefully. When an ordinary ship passes through luminous plankton, the water around the bow can become brighter. Each disperments may produce a sudden blue-green glow, but here, the pale sea was already shining before the ship reached it. The foam at the bow did not seem to create the light. Instead, the moving water sometimes appeared darker against the white surface around it. The ship was not painting light across a dark sea. It was cutting a shadow through a glowing one. Ropes hung over the side. Their dark lines stood out clearly against the water below. The lower part of the hull, wet from the waves, seemed surrounded by a strange pale outline where water climbed briefly against the wooden boards and fell away again. The glow moved with it. For a few seconds, the shape of each wave became visible. Then it softened and disappeared into the greater brightness around the ship. A bucket may have been lowered. Perhaps a sailor tied a rope to its handle and watched it descend. The wooden container would have passed through the bright surface and vanished into the darker water beneath. When it was lifted again, glowing water may have streamed from its sides. For a moment, a small portion of the white sea would have been carried onto the deck. The men might have gathered around it. In a bucket, the water may have looked ordinary at first, dark, clear, almost empty. Yet, when the surrounding lantern light was reduced, a faint glow may have remained. The mystery that filled the horizon could now rest inside something small enough to hold with two hands, but even that would not have answered the question. The sailors could see the light. They could touch the water. They could watch it fall between their fingers. Still, they could not tell what was producing it. The naked eye revealed no vast creature beneath the surface. No glowing plants rose around the ship. No floating substance thick enough to explain the brightness could be seen. There was only seawater. Seawater that had somehow become luminous. The crew must have searched the surface for patterns. Perhaps they expected the glow to become weaker in certain places. Perhaps they looked for bands, circles, or patches, but the brightness appeared broad and uniform. It did not resemble a cluster of lamps. It did not seem to come from one direction. The sea itself had become the source. Above the vessel, the stars remained visible. The sky was mostly clear. There was no moon bright enough to cast such a reflection. And even if there had been, reflected moonlight would have formed a path. It would have changed with the angle of the waves. It would have pointed toward the moon. This light did none of those things. It surrounded the ship evenly. Every direction looked pale. There was no center, no beginning, no visible end. The horizon became difficult to judge. Normally, even on a dark night, a sailor could sense the line where ocean met sky. It might be faint, it might disappear beneath clouds, but the eye still searched for it. Now the pale water stretched outward, beneath a sky that seemed almost unnaturally black. The contrast between them was so strong that the sea appeared flat and endless. The ship might have seemed suspended between two surfaces, a dark roof above, a white plain below. The familiar depth of the ocean vanished. The water no longer looked like something that descended for miles beneath the hull. It looked solid, as though the vessel was sliding across frozen ground. Yet each wave that touched the ship reminded the crew that this was still water. It moved, it breathed, it whispered along the planks. The sound remained ordinary, only the sight had changed. That may have been one of the strangest parts of the experience. The sea looked transformed, but it sounded the same. There was still the low rush beneath the bow, still the soft slap of water against wood, still the creak of the masts, still the gentle strain of canvas under wind. The ears reported an ordinary night at sea. The eyes reported another world. Perhaps some of the men spoke quietly among themselves. They may have asked whether the glow had been seen before. Older sailors might have remembered distant stories from other voyages, stories of white water near India, stories of shining seas near Java, stories dismissed in port as exaggeration. At sea, men often carried memories from one ocean to another. A strange light observed 20 years earlier could survive in conversation long after the ship itself had disappeared. Yet even a remembered story would not have made the sight less extraordinary. To hear of a white sea was one thing, to stand above it was another. The deck lanterns now seemed small. Human-made light came from narrow flames protected by glass. It illuminated a rope, a compass, a face, or a section of deck. Beyond that small circle, darkness returned. But the sea below needed no lantern. Its glow stretched farther than any lamp could reach. The men aboard the Shooting Star had crossed oceans using lights made by human hands. Now they were surrounded by a light no one had lit. Captain Kingman watched carefully. A captain's responsibility did not disappear simply because the ocean had become beautiful. He still had to consider depth, direction, weather, and the safety of the vessel. Unusual water might indicate hidden shoals. A strange color could suggest sediment, reefs, or volcanic material. Every unknown sign required attention. Soundings may have been considered. The charts may have been checked again. The position may have been calculated beneath the stars. Yet all ordinary measurements would have told the same story. The ship was in deep, open water. There was no land beneath the glow. No reef rose toward the hull. No sandbank explained the pale surface. The white sea was not a sign of shallow water. It was something else. Hour after hour, the Shooting Star continued through it. The glow did not fade immediately. It did not disappear when the wind shifted slightly. It did not break apart when the waves changed shape. The vast, luminous field moved with the ocean, and the ship moved through it like a dark needle, passing slowly across white cloth. The wake stretched behind. The masts swayed gently above. The sailors remained awake longer than they otherwise might have. A man finishing his watch may have hesitated before going below deck. Another coming up to replace him may have stopped in surprise at the first sight of the water. Those sleeping below may have been called quietly not because danger had arrived, but because this was something no one should miss. One by one, men came to the deck. Each saw the same impossible sea. Each carried away a slightly different memory. One may have remembered the color, another the silence, another the darkness of the sky, another the way the ship's wake appeared like a shadow. Years later, they might have struggled to explain it. Words such as glowing, white, milky, and snowy would all seem incomplete because the ocean had not merely reflected light, it had become light, and beneath the ship, hidden from every human eye, countless tiny sources were shining together. Each one alone was too small to transform the night. Each one alone would have been almost nothing, but together, across mile after mile of open water, they created something larger than the vessel, larger than the crew, larger than anything the men aboard could see from the deck. The sailors did not know how small the source was. They could only see how immense the result had become. And perhaps that was the deepest mystery of the White Sea. It joined two scales that seemed impossible to connect, the smallest forms of life and one of the largest surfaces on Earth. The ship sailed between them, above the microscopic world, below the distant stars, moving slowly through a field of snow that was not cold, through a light that made no flame, through an ocean that remained calm, even as it revealed how little of itself human beings truly understood. What Captain Kingman could not explain. The White Sea remained minute after minute. The shooting star continued her quiet passage through water that seemed to belong more to a dream than to the ordinary world. Captain W.E. Kingman did not hurry. A good captain rarely did. The ocean rewarded patience far more often than haste. He stood upon the quarterdeck, his eyes moving slowly from the bow to the distant horizon, then back again toward the water flowing alongside the hull. He had spent enough years at sea to know that the first explanation was not always the correct one. The ocean often invited quick conclusions. Then, just as quietly, it proved them wrong. He considered the moon. There was none bright enough to paint such a scene. He considered hidden shoals, but the charts showed deep water. The sea beneath the ship remained calm and steady. Nothing suggested that the vessel had entered dangerous shallows. He thought of fog, yet fog concealed. It softened outlines. It swallowed distant objects. This strange brightness did the opposite. It revealed the smallest movements of the water. It outlined every gentle swell with pale light. He looked toward the sail. They still filled gently with the warm tropical wind. Nothing in the weather had changed. The compass remained steady. The stars continued their slow journey across the heavens. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary. Everything except the sea itself. There were no scientific instruments aboard capable of measuring such a phenomenon. No cameras, no underwater lamps, no devices that could collect invisible life from beneath the surface. The captain possessed only the same tools every mariner of his generation relied upon: his eyes, his experience, his charts, his compass, and his journal. The sea could not be taken back to port. Only words could. Perhaps that was why sailors learned to observe so carefully. A careless description might one day become a forgotten story. A careful one might survive long enough for another generation to understand. Captain Kingman knew that whatever he witnessed tonight deserved careful observation. He resisted the temptation to explain too quickly. Instead, He watched. He noticed that the brightness remained remarkably even. The ship passed over gentle swells without entering darker water. The glow seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. He noticed that the wake behaved strangely. Rather than producing light, it briefly interrupted it for a few moments. Darker ribbons followed behind the stern before the pale glow quietly returned. He watched floating pieces of driftwood. He watched patches of foam. He watched the changing surface around the hull. Nothing behaved exactly as he expected. It was as though the rules governing the sea had been rewritten for a single night. Around him, the crew continued speaking in lowered voices. One sailor suggested that perhaps the seafloor contained pale sand reflecting starlight. Another wondered whether volcanic minerals had somehow changed the color of the water. Someone quietly mentioned stories heard years before in another port, stories of oceans that glowed without fire, stories that older sailors repeated only after long voyages and strong coffee. No one laughed, not tonight. The sight before them was too real. The captain listened without interrupting. Experience had taught him something important. When people encounter something truly unfamiliar, they naturally search for familiar explanations. The mind reaches first for things it already understands. Moonlight, mist, ice, sand, reflections, anything but the unknown. Yet none of those ideas stayed comfortably beside what they were actually seeing. The shooting star continued forward. The pale sea continued with her. Kingman found himself looking less at the horizon and more directly into the water. He leaned slightly over the rail. The glow seemed gentle, not harsh, not dazzling, almost inviting. If light could possess silence, perhaps this was what silent light looked like. It asked for nothing. It announced nothing. It simply existed. Somewhere beneath that calm surface, countless small events must have been taking place. The captain could not see them. He did not yet know that the greatest mysteries of the sea were often hidden in forms too small for human eyes. To him, the water appeared almost empty, a vast, luminous plain without visible cause. Perhaps that was what made the experience so unforgettable. Storms revealed themselves. Clouds announced rain. Lightning declared its presence with sound and brilliance. But this phenomenon offered neither warning nor explanation. It arrived gently. It remained peacefully. It challenged nothing except certainty. Time became difficult to judge. The crew had entered the strange brightness so gradually that no one could say exactly when ordinary night had ended, nor could anyone predict when it might return. Every mile traveled suggested another mile still ahead. The luminous sea seemed unwilling to end. Kingman glanced upward again. The stars had guided sailors for thousands of years. Entire civilizations had crossed oceans by reading those distant lights. Tonight, however, another light surrounded his ship, one that appeared not above, but below. He could not help noticing the strange balance between the heavens and the sea. Above him, countless stars scattered across infinite darkness. Below him, another field of light stretched just as far as he could see. One belonged to the universe, the other belonged to Earth, yet both inspired the same feeling: wonder. There is a particular kind of silence that exists only far from land. No wagons, no church bells, no barking dogs, no distant voices carried by the wind, only the breathing rhythm of the sea. Tonight, even that silence seemed changed, not louder, not quieter, simply deeper. It was as though the glowing ocean encouraged every man aboard to lower his voice. No order had been given, no rule required it. Yet, conversation naturally softened. Some mysteries invite questions, others invite quiet. This one seemed to prefer quiet. The captain eventually reached for his journal. He understood that memory alone was not enough. Human memory changes. It reshapes details. It smooths rough edges. A written observation could preserve what memory might someday lose. Carefully, he began recording what he had seen, not conclusions, observations. The appearance of the sea, its color, its remarkable extent, its resemblance to a vast snow-covered plain, the calm weather, the clear sky, the absence of any ordinary explanation. Those words would survive long after the voyage itself had ended, long after the wooden ship had vanished from the world's oceans, long after every sailor standing upon her deck had completed his final voyage. The journal would continue speaking. At the time, Captain Kingman could not have imagined that scientists more than a century later would read accounts like his with entirely new eyes. To him, he was simply describing an extraordinary night. To the future, he was preserving evidence that nature had quietly revealed, one of its rarest spectacles. The shooting star sailed onward. Behind her, the dark wake slowly faded back into pale water. Ahead of her, the luminous horizon remained unchanged. Nothing urged the ship to hurry. Nothing threatened her course. The mystery neither approached nor retreated. It simply accompanied the vessel across the warm waters near Java. There are moments in history that become famous the instant they occur. Battles, coronations, great discoveries. And then there are quieter moments witnessed by only a handful of people beneath an ordinary night sky. Moments written carefully into a captain's log, then placed upon a shelf for decades before anyone realizes their importance. This was one of those moments, a captain doing nothing more extraordinary than watching the sea, a crew doing nothing more remarkable than paying attention, and an ocean revealing something so gentle that the world would need generations before it understood that the truth had been waiting in those simple observations all along. When dawn finally came, the sunlight would erase the mystery from sight. The white sea would surrender once more to ordinary blue. But the questions born during that silent tropical night would continue their voyage long after the shooting star had disappeared beyond the horizon. When an eyewitness becomes a legend. Morning came slowly over the sea. At first, the eastern horizon softened. The black sky became deep blue, then gray, then pale gold. One by one, the stars disappeared. The highest sails of the shooting star caught the first weak light of dawn, while the lower decks still rested in shadow. For hours, the ship had traveled through a sea that glowed beneath the darkness. Now daylight began to return the world to its familiar shape. The white water gradually lost its strange brilliance. What had seemed almost solid during the night became ordinary ocean again. The pale surface turned silver, then blue. The boundary between the glowing sea and the morning light became impossible to see. No sudden ending announced itself. No final flash marked the disappearance. The mystery simply faded into daylight. The sailors remained on deck. Some had watched through most of the night. Others had slept only briefly. They looked over the rail as though expecting the water to reveal something hidden beneath it. But in the growing morning, The sea appeared almost empty. Small waves moved around the hull. Foam gathered near the bow. The wake stretched behind the stern. Nothing remained to show that only hours earlier, the entire horizon had seemed covered with snow. The same water that had transformed the night now looked completely ordinary. This was one of the difficulties of the sea. It rarely preserved its wonders for long. A storm might leave broken spars. A reef might leave damage along a hull. A whale might leave blood, oil, or the memory of a dark shape disappearing below the surface. But the white sea left almost nothing behind. No stone, no shell, no piece of glowing material that could be wrapped in cloth and carried ashore. Only memory remained. Memory and the words Captain Kingman had written. The shooting star continued her voyage. The crew returned gradually to routine. Ropes were checked, sails were adjusted, meals were prepared. The deck was washed, the compass was read, the position of the ship was calculated. Life aboard a sailing vessel did not pause for wonder. Even after the impossible had been witnessed, ordinary work continued, and yet the night remained present in the minds of the men who had seen it. Perhaps they spoke of it at breakfast. Perhaps one sailor tried to describe the way the water had seemed brighter than the sky. Another may have insisted that the wake looked dark. Someone else might have remembered the silence. A man who had slept through part of the event may have regretted not coming to the deck sooner. Already, only a few hours later, the experience was beginning to divide into separate memories. Each sailor carried a different part of it. This is how eyewitness accounts are born, not from perfect agreement, not from identical words, but from many people standing in the same place, each noticing something slightly different. Captain Kingman's responsibility was to turn those impressions into a record. He could not write everything. No captain's log could preserve every whisper on deck, every question, every expression on a sailor's face. He had to choose what mattered: the date, the location, the condition of the sky, the appearance of the water, the extraordinary extent of the glow, its resemblance to a vast field of snow. These details were simple, but simplicity gave them strength. A dramatic tale might be dismissed. A careful observation was harder to ignore. When the ship eventually reached port, the white sea would no longer surround them. The men would step onto solid ground. They would hear carts, bells, voices, and doors closing. The ordinary world would return with all its noise. The event would begin to sound impossible, even to those who had witnessed it. That often happens after a great distance has been crossed. At sea, something may seem unquestionably real. On land, beneath familiar roofs, and among people who were not there, the same event can begin to resemble a dream. The sailors might tell the story in taverns, warehouses, homes, or crowded docks. Some listeners would believe them. Others would smile politely. Some would imagine that moonlight had been mistaken for something more mysterious. Others might blame fatigue. Long voyages could exhaust the mind. Heat could blur the senses. A dark horizon could deceive even an experienced eye. And sailors were already famous for stories that grew larger each time they were told. The sea was filled with tales of impossible islands, enormous serpents, ghost ships, and creatures with human faces. A glowing white ocean could easily join them. That was how observation became folklore, not because the event had been false, but because no one on land could see it. Science in the middle of the 19th century was changing rapidly. New instruments revealed structures invisible to the naked eye. Microscopes opened tiny worlds. Naturalists gathered specimens from distant oceans. Explorers returned with plants, animals, and minerals never before described. Yet the sea remained difficult to study. Its surface was vast. Its depths were hidden. Its rare events appeared far from laboratories. A scientist could not simply travel to Java and wait for the ocean to turn white. The phenomenon might not return for years. It might appear hundreds of miles away. It might begin beneath clouds, or during a season when no research vessel was nearby. The sailors saw the event because chance placed them there. Science remained elsewhere. For generations, that distance separated the report from its explanation. Other ships would later describe similar waters. Some accounts would come from the Arabian Sea, others from regions near Indonesia. A few would mention pale green light. Others would describe a milky white glow. Some would compare it to snow, others to fog illuminated from below. The wording changed. The central mystery did not. An entire sea appeared to shine steadily in darkness. These reports were scattered across ship logs, naval records, private journals, newspapers, and hydrographic documents. No single account seemed sufficient. Each event happened far from the others. Each disappeared before anyone could investigate. But slowly, the descriptions formed a pattern. The White Sea was not one sailor's mistake. It was not one captain's imagination. It was a rare event, returning across different oceans and different generations. Still, patterns are difficult to see when information is spread across decades. A report may be written in one country and forgotten in another. A ship's log may remain unread on a shelf. A newspaper account may be treated as curiosity rather than evidence. The ocean could repeat itself while human knowledge remained divided. Captain Kingman could not know any of this. He could not know that his words might one day be compared with reports written before and after his voyage. He could not know that scientists would later search old maritime records for descriptions like his. He could not imagine satellites passing above Earth, sensitive enough to detect faint light across the night ocean. To him, the event belonged only to the voyage of the shooting star, a singular night, a quiet mystery, something seen, recorded, and left behind. But history often works this way. One person preserves a detail without knowing why it will matter. Another person, many years later, finds it. A third compares it with something new, and gradually, what once seemed like an isolated wonder becomes part of a larger truth. The shooting star sailed onward beneath the morning sun. The sails brightened, the deck warmed, the white sea vanished completely. Only blue water surrounded the ship now. Yet the event had not truly disappeared. It had moved from the ocean into language, from light into memory, from memory into ink. And there, inside a captain's careful description, it would wait. It would wait through changing ships, through changing maps, through new discoveries, through generations of doubt, until one day, long after the men aboard the shooting star were gone, science would return to those old words and realize that the sailors had not been describing a legend. They had been describing the truth.